What is up? My name is Jonathan Crane. I co-host a show called the American Peloton where we talk about bike racing in the US. On our last episode, we talked a lot about safety. There have been a few horrific incidents, so I really wanted to make this video to synthesize all of the feedback I got from that episode and also continue the conversation. I feel like as crit racing season is sort of winding down in the US, I don't want this conversation to fall by the wayside. I feel like we've seen a little bit of progress as the season has continued, but I would love for some of that to be captured, and really what I want to hear is concrete ideas that could be implemented into some sort of rule change or set of guidelines that promoters could look to. And I think I've got a couple of ideas that I haven't heard anyone else say. So since we put out that episode, and I'll link to that episode somewhere, but it's available on YouTube, Twitch, and also in podcast form. Since we put that episode out, this post on Robin Carpenter from Legion of LA's Substack came out. There's a lot of good stuff in here. The thing that really stands out is these barricades. This is a brand called Boplen. They make these barricades specifically for bike racing. And I think in a perfect world, this is the real solution. These barricades don't have any sort of open face on them. They're completely closed off. They're also angled back from the rider. What that does is if you blow a corner and your tire touches it, you're not necessarily going down. There's nothing you're going to hit because they snap together in a way that's almost completely flush. And then as they angle away from the rider, if you are pushed where your tire is right against it, your handlebars are not going to catch on anything. If you do fall over into them, you can slide along this surface rather than getting caught up on it. Now, this is the ideal solution. There is no pricing. This is their actual brochure. They look to be mostly plastic. They list a bunch of partners on this website, and they all seem to be European. I don't know what it would cost or if they're even available to get them in the US, but big list of races that are using them. Balois Belgium Tour, Scheldeprijs. While this is probably the ultimate top level solution, don't actually think this is going to happen in America. I did search around for someone else who makes something similar. This brand called First Fence, they make something similar that actually has a price on it. Not quite as good. It's not plastic. The surface is not as flat and flush, but these do lean back from the rider. Also not quite as good because this bottom edge, I would love to see this edge be flat with the bottom again, so that if your tire touches it, you can ride along it. But the fact that there is not a hole big enough for an appendage to go through here on the mesh, they also appear to tilt back away from the riders again so that your handlebars are not going to catch anything if you're right up against the barricade, is a big improvement. Now these actually do have a price on them, so just to do a start finish a few hundred meters on either side of the finish line, you would need a couple hundred, which is going to run you almost $30,000. The scale of American racing is probably not such that every promoter can have these. Now I would love to see maybe a top level series like an ACC or a USA Crits invest in one set of these, or even USA Cycling. I would love if some of the money from my USA Cycling license went into buying a set of these that could be used at national level events, if only for the start finish. So that's the sort of pie in the sky solution that would be great, but I don't think we're going to actually see. I want to bring it back down now to things that I think we can implement and drill down on really specific things that I think should be included in a set of guidelines. Going back to Salt Lake, this was the race the day before actually the big incident with Jastrab. Something I see here that has horrific potential consequences, and I heard a lot of people complaining about, rightfully so, is the use of these barricades with tape between them. I think this has to be an either or scenario. Either if you're going to use these barricades, which I don't love, it would be much better if they are connected together, and if you're going to use tape, I think that whole section should be taped. Problem with doing it this way is that each of these edges is something a rider could possibly hit, and that's really when you get the most injured, is either when an appendage goes through or you hit one of these flush edges. If you hit one of these barriers at a 90-degree angle, it does sort of move with you and absorb some of the impact. If you hit it head on at the angle that's being presented multiple times here throughout this straightaway, any of those is going to present a pretty horrific injury. I know what they're doing. They're trying to use less barriers to cover more space. I think this should be expressly forbidden, the use of interspersed barricades. I think barricades need to be connected to one another wherever they're used. Someone pointed this race out to me as a good example of what to do barricade-wise, the Sand City criteriums. Apparently the Sand City promoter built these themselves. You can kind of see right here out of PVC. I love these, and I would love to see a blueprint for how these are made. It looks like these are PVC weighted down with sandbags. They have a flat surface on them, and I know that in high winds, the completely flush surface there might present a problem, but these look great to me. I think this is a really attainable version of something like this. I think going to the handmade PVC version, if the promoter for this Sand City criterium can do it, I think that bigger races like the ACC or USA Crits could definitely do this. Okay, my guideline would be, I would love to see a barricade like this, so something that is tilted back, flush bottom edge, and ideally a solid surface on each barricade. Even the ones without a scrim still have some sort of like covering. The importance of the covering is that if you fall on the barricade, you're going to slide along it. There's much less chance that something goes through it on at least the start-finish straight, which appears to be what is done here. This entire start-finish straight has these barricades. I also like that these are PVC because if you do hit them at a bad angle, they're going to move with you a little bit more. Another thing I would like to see is wherever possible, if the barricades can be placed on top of the curb. Putting the barricades on the curb, again, wherever possible, there are going to be some places that just doesn't work because of things like hard bump outs or curbs that are at an irregular spacing throughout a straightaway. The curb sort of serves as that hard edge for the racers, and then the barricade is really doing the crowd control to keep the crowd off of the course. You can see here on the backside of the course at Littleton, there is tape up here, like a cyclocross course tape, strung along, keeping spectators off, and then when the barricades do begin, the first barricade is up on top of the curb. I like that a lot. There's only one hard surface being created here. I think this could also go into my like general recommendations. I think wherever tape is being used, we should be double taping it like a cyclocross course, so not just tape up at this level, but also at the midpoint. I also think that it's crucial that whenever tape is used, tape can only be used outside the curb line or somewhere that a racer can't get to. One thing I have seen happen in cyclocross races is where a racer gets pushed into the tape and the tape hooks their handlebars, and then either all of these bollards that the tape is hooked to are going to fly onto the course, or they're going to stretch that tape to the limit, and when it snaps back, it will pull the bars. So the tape is really just there for crowd control, and the curb defines the edges of the race course for the racers. This picture I pulled from Robin's Substack post shows the type of barriers. This is what was at Tulsa. And a lot of the injuries we've seen have been arm related. I know Justin Williams was, and it came from having his arm kind of pulled into the barricade. What I would love to see as a guideline is at a very minimum, there is a scrim, a mesh scrim along anytime these barricades are used, or any barricade with an opening that a limb could go through. Some kind of scrim, even if it's blank, even if it's just cloth, goes on that, at least on the outside of the course. I recognize that, we're sort of stair-stepping up the requirements for what a promoter has to provide. I think a lot of these incidents happen on the outside of the course because as you corner, everybody gets pushed wider, and I think generally a lot of these incidents happen on the outside of the course. I think it's pretty rare that someone is holding the inside to the degree that a rider is getting caught on the inside fencing. I'm sure it does happen, but if the fence like this was covered on the outside of the course, that would reduce incidents by 70%, or not prevent the incidents from happening, but take them from being bone-breaking, potentially life-altering falls to being something that a rider can walk away from with scrapes. So when we're thinking about placing these advertisements, some of them are just a single board like this. And when that happens, oftentimes that board is placed in line with a single barricade. Rather than being placed flush with the edges, I think they should actually be placed on the seam, and then each one should overlap the previous one in the direction of rider travel. So actually this one should go behind and slightly overlap like that. One thing that's happened a lot is riders have fallen into a barricade, the first one they hit moves, and then they hit the seam of the second one. So applying an overlapping covering there is going to create a more solid surface that you're going to slide along rather than fall through. Another thing I would love to see is wherever an edge is exposed, so the first time a barrier is used, there should be some kind of padding on it. It does seem like there has been some progress made on this this front. I think the barriers we saw at the Denver Criterium, the most recent ACC race, were much better than those we saw at the Salt Lake Criterium. I just wanted to quantify some of the ideas around why I think that's better and then throw some of mine out there. I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't really expect this video to like do numbers, but I would really appreciate if anybody who has thoughts on this would comment them, and let's keep this conversation going, and also share this with anyone who might care, especially race promoters. Thank you guys for watching, and let's all be safe out there. Thanks.